Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Baldacci, and welcome to Baldacci on Business. Tonight we have a very, very special show. For the next half hour, we're going to have a conversation with my good friend, Mr. F. Lee Bailey. Lee, thank you very much for being here. Most of you know Lee as probably one of the world's foremost attorneys, a Marine fighter pilot, writer, author, lecturer. Lee has also hosted his own network TV shows, probably one of the most famous individuals, and have been at the forefront of so many important cases at least for the last 50 years that I'm aware of. But Lee tonight is going to give us a little bit of insight into his business career, his business background, and hopefully give those of you who are watching tonight a little bit of an idea in terms of his perception, the lessons that he's learned with the various businesses that he's been involved in over the years. And Lee, before we get started to talk about business, you recently moved to Maine, and I know you're in your late 70s, and you recently took the bar exam, the Maine State Bar exam. Can you kind of give the audience a little bit of indication of what you're doing? And
well, I had pretty much decided that 45 years of trying cases and practicing law was enough until I moved back to Maine, and I lay emphasis on the word back. After all, my mother was married on Cousins Island.
But you have some deep roots in Maine.
I have some very deep roots in Maine, but I began to get to know a bunch of lawyers in Maine, some judges, and to watch the whole system operate here. And then there's the overlay of the general population in Maine. They're different kinds of people. I find them in Minnesota and Maine, but Maine has an ocean, so it's no contest. And I decided this could be a pretty nice place to practice, and besides, if you've got nothing to do today, why not take the bar exam?
Exactly. What was that experience like for you? I mean, with these 20-year-olds sitting around you, what was it like?
Well, I wasn't really aware of the people that are coming out of law school. As a matter of fact, those who took the bar, about 90 of them, in February, nobody was my age, but some were close. And one of the proctors, a lady, came up to me and she said, you know, I'm 80 years old, but I do this every year because I love it, and I'm glad you are here because it proves we're still worth something. And I thought that was sweet.
That is sweet. And since you've been here in Maine, I know you've been very, very generous with your time and your talents, speaking before Rotary clubs, chambers of commerce from one end of the state to the other, helping people with communication skills, but also you have a passion for prison reform. And I know at the Portland Chamber, it must be 2 years now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, you spoke to the Portland Chamber about the prison reform issue. Do you want to touch on that briefly, Lee?
Yes, and passion may not be the right word. There are a lot of people in prisons around the country, including yours, who should never get out. Right. They will never be controllable citizens with any sense of responsibility. About a third should get out tomorrow. They're a drag on the economy. And the remaining third are trainable and could be qualified to get out, provided they're closely watched. But the most inefficient phenomenon in the organization of America from Ben Franklin forward, who invented prisons as a substitute for cutting off an arm or public whippings and so forth. It is the biggest failure we've ever seen. 75% of the people who get out go back. Yeah. That's not good. They didn't learn much there. And I think so much could be done with that. I've seen it done, that I've been urging Maine to take advantage of that because they are poised to be better off than any other state that I know of. They have a very small population of minorities, and they are trouble in any prison because they get discriminated against, they lash back. It's just a management problem. Maine doesn't really have that. And it could do an awful lot more than it does and save itself a lot of money. These guys cost about $60,000 a year.
Taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
Are you getting any traction with the business community here, Lee, since you started speaking out on it?
Well, I probably picked a very bad time, because to get businesses to hire convicts, and if you don't get them a job when they get out, they will go back. They'll try, but carrying that big C on their forehead, they'll go back. Trying to get businessmen to hire convicts when they've had to let employees that have been around for 20 years go because of a sinking economy is pretty tough. I'm seeing an uptick now. I think Maine, the U.S. generally is seeing an uptick. So it may gain some traction. I would have to say so far, not much.
Well, good luck with your bar exam. We're wishing you all the best with that, and we really applaud your efforts with the prison reform issue. With respect to your business background, the business career, that I don't think a lot of people are aware of or familiar with, Lee. I'd like you to spend a little bit of time talking about your experience, how you got into business. You know, you're a lawyer. You're one of the most famous trial attorneys in the country. How did you get involved in business? Was it through the law, through your connection in the law?
No, quite the reverse.
Okay.
I was an aviator before I ever dreamed of going to law school. My aspiration when I went to Harvard College was to take all English courses, which I did for 2 years, and then I went in the Marine Corps, but I wanted to be a writer and wound up doing that as well. The law thing was really an accident, but I got into business because I loved aviation. Anybody in the business of aviation has to have $5 million in order to wind up with $1 million. So that's a passion.
Okay.
I wound up in the boat building business, which I learned right here in Maine when I was very, very young. And in the publishing business, simply because I like to write books, and if nobody else would publish them, I'd publish them myself.
Well, I'd like you to spend a little bit of time talking about those three distinct businesses.
Well, in the aviation business, I was in almost every field, from operating a flight school, operating an airport, saving one from destruction for a new housing project by getting federal money in it. I was asked to head up a helicopter company, and I agreed, and it was in all the papers, and then the buyer's check bounced. And I called the seller and I said, I'll tell you what, give me 30 days to raise the money and I'll buy it. If you do that, I won't sue you, because you put my name all over the world as the president. And we made that deal.
And that company was?
Enstrom Helicopter Company. There are a number floating around New England. It's a three-place piston-powered machine at the time, and we became the biggest in the world. We finally got Bell to stop producing that bubble ship that you see in all the MASH series and so forth, because we were a better helicopter and better marketed. And then I sold that company, and a friend of mine said, you know, we could buy Chris Craft pretty cheap. I said, wait a minute. I'll help buy it. I'm not putting money in it. I'm not going to manage it. I've learned that lesson. But we did, and Chris Craft became very, very successful.
And then publishing?
Publishing, I was able to get my first book published, and it hit the bestseller list. And that.
What was that book? The Defense
It's called
Never
The
Rests?
Defense Never Rests.
Great book.
And it was about some early cases, the Boston Strangler, Dr. Sam Shepard, who most people know as the fugitive. The My Lai 4 massacre actually was in the second book. Dr. Carl Coppolino, who got simultaneously indicted in New Jersey and Florida for murdering his girlfriend's husband and then his wife. But these were sensational cases, and you never heard of any businesses because this was front page stuff.
Sure.
And it kind of masked any other activity I had going on. But my mother and I started a publishing company in 1983, publishing books for teachers who taught in nursery school.
Really? Talk
And
about
it's
that.
been very successful. It's called Telshare Publishing. I put out a couple of books through the company, but mainly my mother was probably the pioneer in preschool education. Here's a gal who got a teaching degree at 18, a bachelor's at 44, master's from Harvard at 55 and a PhD at 70, and kept on trucking until she was 90. But she was very well known and kind of wrote the book on how to be more than a babysitter when you've got kids who are very important at 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
And teach them something. Don't just sit around and wait for kindergarten to pick it up. And these books were very widely accepted in the industry of what's called preschool education. And they are still in publication, still circulate. The authors are still grinding out neat little titles like Things to Do with Toddlers and Twos.
Who would have thought that F. Lee Bailey would have any connection with preschool?
F. Lee Bailey would not have thought that.
That's a great story. That's fascinating. But with that experience, Lee, what did you learn? What were the takeaways that some of the things that we could talk about tonight to our audience? Those who are thinking about starting a business, buying a business, and that's really pretty much the people that tune into this show. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way?
Well, as a result of what I learned, and I'll go back into that, there are two things that I generally do today. One is preventive medicine. I can take a look at the way you've organized your company and the kinds of people that you've got working for you, the product you're making and how you make it and distribute it, and kind of see problems coming. And the best thing in the world for a businessman is to see them coming and get control of them before they ever erupt and anybody hears about them.
Right.
And the other half of what I do is troubleshooting. This is a problem that's gotten loose. And it's threatening to the business or the people in the business, and it needs a quick solution. Sometimes you have to cauterize a wound to stop it from bleeding. And to have the courage to do that is often very difficult for businessmen who've got family involved and relatives involved and employees that they value very highly, but cutting the cord is sometimes survival. And I learned that, I think, the hard way. It cost me a lot of money. I had some good times and some moments I'd rather not revisit when bad decisions or lack of decisions, which is the same thing really, caught up with me. And suddenly I looked around and you know, my Lord, how did I let this happen? But it did teach, and of course the business of trying cases is really troubleshooting. If a case gets to the point where it's got to go to court to get resolved, number one, that's very bad. And number two, it's not going to be pleasant. Number three, probably everyone will lose. But doing your very best when you're in the courtroom is troubleshooting. And so combining the business experience and the legal experience has, I think, enabled me to see trouble coming and to shut it down or help shut it down, and also what to do if it's already arrived. If you catch Darth Vader coming over the hill, you might get him. But if you don't get him till he's halfway down the hill, then you're into troubleshooting.
That's right. And that's going to be a focus of what you intend to do living and working here in Maine?
Well, it is generally what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I must say the reason that I came back is simply because of the quality of the people that you deal with. This is a handshake state. I'm surprised the lawyers can make a living. And I'm astonished by the fact that Maine has more lawyers per capita than anywhere but Washington, D.C. And those lawyers aren't there for the people in Washington. But they don't seem to be very litigious. The courts are not backed up horribly. All the signs are good, and most people respect their courts in this state. In some states, they have just the opposite attitude and say, well, if I go to court, I'm going to get the wrong end of the deal, and this judge will be against me, and that judge will be against me. I don't find any of that up here, which is very encouraging. I won't say enlightening, because I've been here too many years to be surprised, but delighted that it's still alive and well. And that's the asset this state has, which frankly it is not managed very well, or it would have a better business atmosphere that it's got. It's gotten a bad reputation.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. I mean, you've been here enough. You've I know from personal experience working with a number of different companies, helping them grow, helping them market, opening up your Rolodex, which is phenomenal. And the intent, the objective is to create companies here in Maine, to employ people, to pay taxes, and to improve the state. And we thank you for the work that you're doing in that regard, Lee. But let's talk about the business climate. You spoke to the Maine Manufacturers Association a few months ago. What was the message you gave manufacturers here in Maine?
Well, I tried to lay out a balance sheet, assets and liabilities. The assets that one finds in Maine is, first, it's a gorgeous state. People like to live here. Yep. It's but the most interesting coastline anywhere in the world, not just in the United States. It's got a very good quality of worker. I think when a guy comes to work for you in Maine, with very few exceptions, they do their best to do a good job, and they have great skills. For instance, the joiner work here that you find in the yachting companies and elsewhere is at a very high level. So with all of those good things going on, how come people are going to New Hampshire and buying their liquor there as well? And the answer is that we have not managed our production of revenues well. We are notorious for a very high personal income tax. Now, many times, that doesn't really take many dollars out of somebody's pocket, but it's frightening.
Sure, it's a perception.
And I've had people that say, well, look, I'll come work in Maine as long as I can live in New Hampshire. You know, they don't have this tax, they don't have that tax. What they do have is a pretty heavy real estate tax.
They do.
And what they don't have is more than 13 miles of coastline, which isn't very interesting. And I went to school in New Hampshire for many years. I like the state. But we've got to overcome that. And Maine has not done a good PR job. People either think, well, we're so good, everyone will notice it. We don't have to advertise. Or when they advertise, the wrong message gets out. But people should be breaking down their doors to start companies in Maine. And last time I checked the border down at Kittery, there was no such avalanche headed this way.
Except for a sign on, as you enter Maine, that says open for business.
Well, the problem with that sign is, it says we're open for business, and we couldn't afford a better sign. It's a joke.
Well said. So what was the response from the manufacturers when you met with them?
Lots of applause and some nice comments afterward, and then a comedian came on after me.
Bob Marley.
Yes.
Stole the limelight.
No, it was a good experience. I met a lot of the manufacturers, and it's all well and good to say we've got to attract more people into startup companies.
Right.
We need to get those companies fully fleshed out and employed at the same time, and putting a competitor next door while they're foundering, coming out of this awful management of government funds and business and almost anything else you can name is difficult enough as it is. So what Maine needs are two things in my view. One is a jump start. And number two is to bring somebody in who is not a politician and put him in charge of, let's say, the Department of Economic and Community Development. Yep. Somebody who knows business and knows what to do and is given the power and the money. And the money is a good investment if you do it at the right time and the right way. England just cut everything back too far and it wound up kicking them in the face. Now they're loosening up again. And that's the way, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt taught us years ago, to get an economy back on its feet. And I think Maine has to do that. More input, you'll get more output.
Well said.
Your asset side of the balance sheet is very healthy and very attractive.
Yep.
And the liability side is too much of it's smoke, but it doesn't have a good color or a good odor.
Lee has been working with a number of businesses that I'm familiar with, and one I'd like to talk about a little bit. We had Dick Hale on last month, and he did a phenomenal job. Dick is the founder and CEO of Wentworth Technologies. And Lee has been very actively involved as an advisor to the company. And again, this is a startup company.
It is.
And we raised, I know Dick raised a few $1 million to make it a reality. But talk about your experience working with Dick, with Wentworth, and I think it will I think enlighten our listening audience, our viewers tonight, in terms of what Maine can be as a state that can foster growth and development of businesses here.
I'm happy to do that. I admire Dick Hale as much as anyone I know.
Likewise.
He's just an immensely capable guy with a wonderful demeanor and attitude. I thought the show that you did with him a short while ago was excellent. But Dick Hale would never toot his own horn. Now, in this case, I'm a consultant to his company, but I'm there to learn as much as give advice. And when I can pitch in, I do. But I listen a lot because Dick Hale is an extremely successful businessman. And here's what I admire most about Dick Hale, and I'm not sure that your viewers got a good sense of this because Dick is a very modest guy. A bunch of people came to him wanting to form this company which fills a badly needed niche. And they said, well, why don't we do it in Portsmouth? Yeah. He said, no. Either we do it in Maine or I don't play.
That's correct.
Dick is one of the most successful racing sailors this state has ever known. Yep. He loves the state, and he wanted the business here. And it is here, and it's going to be one of the most successful companies the state has ever owned.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We also, I know you've had some involvement with a couple of university spin-out companies. One was Maine Halibut Farms, which is trying to open up operations and raise money, raising halibut on land. And you've been instrumental in trying to work with that company and open up some doors. Do you want to talk briefly about that?
Well, one of the things that is advantageous about creeping up on age 80 is that you know everybody.
You look good for 80.
I know everybody, or close to it. And when I learned about this halibut venture, I thought that was pretty exciting because it's long range, based on fish farming elsewhere in the world. It's got a great future, and getting it off the ground is going to take more than a Zeppelin. Yeah. But I just happen to know the most successful fish marketer in the world, who owns Legal Seafood. He's got 33 restaurants up and down the East Coast. Yep. And I called him up and I said, hey, I've got this crazy idea that these people could farm halibut. And I went down to my favorite place in Portland, Harbor Fish.
Right.
And I checked the price of haddock was $8 a pound, and the price of halibut was 21. And I said, there's got to be something here. And sure enough, he said, if you could get me halibut, good Atlantic halibut, on a regular basis, I'd buy a lot of it, but I won't put it in my menu now because I don't know where I'm going to get any. Yeah. And that's not going to happen overnight, but that's the kind of thing that is indigenous to Maine. I mean, this is a fishing community, among other things. Yeah. And fish that come out of Maine are presumed to be good, whether it's lobster or...
It has a great brand. Maine
it does.
A great brand.
Yeah, so those are the kinds of things that don't throw cash at you in the first month or two, but as a long-range project, and my willingness to be involved in that gives you some inkling of how long I think I'm going to live. As a long-range project, it's exciting. Yes. And I don't like that word because Hollywood uses it for almost everything from boiled eggs to a bad movie. But to me, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. Lee, we only have a few minutes left, and I'd like you to maybe put yourself in the position as governor of the state of Maine, and look out across the landscape and pretend you were Paul LePage. We've got 3 minutes left, and just what would you do to help to turn the state around, to make it to create jobs and move the state forward?
I would look at all the reasons that people don't come to Maine and try to solve them very rapidly, and some of those are well known. The tax specter is an ogre. And even though it's greatly exaggerated by the time you sit down and do the numbers in April, That needs to be cured. So there's a PR problem. I would bring in a hotshot to effectively run the DECD, but not at some state salary and not with all the burdens of state machinery hanging over him, with some real power to get out there
And do
and
deals.
kick Fanny,
Yeah.
so to speak. And I would let the world know that Maine had decided to let the world know this really was as good a place to be as its greatest champions have been saying for years. If that got moving, like many other things, the snowball coming down Sugarloaf, it would gain momentum and size, in my view, and even if it didn't, it's worth a try.
Well, we are really lucky to have you here in the state. I'm lucky to call you my friend, and you've just been an incredible mentor and advisor to me and to so many other people looking at working with businesses and trying to make things happen here in this state. So I want to thank you for being on the show, and it's been a pleasure.
Well, I want to thank the state of Maine for staying in business till I could get back.
Yeah, it's good you're here. We only have one more show left in our series before we take a hiatus over the summer. And we're going to bring in two good friends of mine for our next show, Fred Forsley of Shipyard Brewery and Steve Woods, who is just an incredible entrepreneur in the sales and marketing sector. So we're going to learn from them about what makes them successful and hopefully what can make you successful next month. So again, Lee, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you.